Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here, the host of the Smart Business Revolution podcast. And each week I get to talk to really smart and interesting CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs of companies and organizations like YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard, LendingTree, OpenTable, Act Software, and many more. I'm also the co-founder of Rise 25, where we help to connect B2B business owners to their ideal prospects. And first, I want to give a quick shout out to Alex Loback, who is the daughter of who I'm interviewing today. I know Alex through EO here in San Francisco. And, her father, Bob Loback, of course, he's the president and CEO of two companies, Darcoid and Crest Technology, also known as CrestTec. And he's an expert in supply chain management, value-added distribution services. And what's really interesting is he acquired 4 different companies and merged them to create one larger company in the critical seal business. And he's also acquired operating assets of a semiconductor fab sourcing and distribution company as well. And it's been about a 20-year journey of entrepreneurship and also a family-owned business. So we're going to ask him about that as well and some of his strategies for sales, because he's very good at sales. But first, before we get into that, this interview in this episode is brought to you by Rise 25 Media. Rise 25 helps B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. And if you're listening to this podcast and thinking should I start a podcast? I've been saying yes for 10 years. It's one of the best things I've ever done. And if you want to learn more, you can go to rise25media.com, where we specialize in helping B2B businesses with high client lifetime value. You can also email us at support@rise25media.com. All right, Bob. So I'm excited to talk to you about your entrepreneurial journey here. And, I think what's interesting about you is that you'd worked in the corporate world for a long time, worked for DHL and other companies. And then about 20 years ago, around the year 2000, you decided to start your own company. So how did that come about? Because it's a big undertaking, of course.
That was, John, that was sheer luck. I mean, that was verbalizing my dreams. Talking to people. So, I knew at DHL that every year they'd have an annual review, structured organization. I started there when I was 32. And every year I'd say, don't worry about me. I'm eventually going to own my own business. And so they'd say, well, what do you want to do? And I said, give me something challenging. Give me something I can sink my teeth in that I can learn from. So I ended up going from spot to spot to spot, and I ended up being the guy that started stuff. They needed a industrial engineering group. They needed a value improvement group. They needed an import-export group. They needed a gateway group. They needed a logistics supply chain group. I was the guy that started it. And so I moved on to something, and what I realized, I come from Arthur Andersen, an accounting degree.
Yeah, I was going to say you have an accounting degree, right?
And I used to study financial. I used to study financial systems.
And do you so that must have been helpful, because you seem like a very personable guy. I would never have guessed you as come from an accoung background. You seem like
I wanted to be an accountant, and what I figured out is I'm really a salesman. I'm not an accountant. So I moved out of Arthur Andersen, went to work for Lucasfilm. I had studied George Lucasfilm's financial systems.
Now, this was in the early 80s? You were working at Lucasfilm?
This was in the early 80s. I was at Industrial Light and Magic.
In San Rafael?
In San Rafael.
In Marin County, where we both live. Okay. Yeah. What was it like working for George Lucas back then? That must have been a small operation back then, right? It
was very small. For me, it was an unbelievable experience, but it was an awakening. They were my client. They hired me to to do an accounting review of their accounting systems because they were just starting to make a ton of money and they needed structure. So I did that. And then they approached me after about a year saying, would you be involved in a corporate competition? And I go, well, what do you mean? And I go, well, the general manager of Industrial Light and Magic, Tom Smith, wants to retire. And so we want to create a corporate Thunderdome. We want to put 2 men in, 1 man out. And we want a person with corporate and business background, and we want a person with artistic background. And we're going to put them in the Thunderdome. We're going to do a 3-month evaluation of the two. And the winner is going to be the heir apparent to Tom Smith as the general manager of an ILM.
How cutthroat. I've never heard of that before.
Oh, it's totally cutthroat. And I go, well, hey, I'm in. I'm, whatever it takes. What a great opportunity. I love this company, and this is an opportunity and chance of a lifetime. So I jumped in. First day I get called into Tom Smith's office. George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, and my competitor are in the room, and they're talking about a movie that they want to do, Spielberg wants to do. And he's just dialoguing with Tom.
It's got to be Raiders of the Lost Ark.
No, it wasn't.
No? Okay.
And I can't disclose it. I don't even remember it. I think it was Dune or something.
Okay. All right.
And Tom Smith, after the meeting, we didn't say much of anything. We were just taking notes. Warren Franklin and I were taking notes. He was my counterpart, the competition.
Okay.
And Warren's a great guy from the artistic side. Tom Smith turns to and says, oh, you guys are dismissed. Go come up with a budget for the special effects view of Steven's idea. And I walked away and I like, shit, I have no idea what to do here. But anyway, so I had to learn. It was a quick learning thing. It was awesome. Wow. The creative talent at that organization is incredible. I met some great guys, but as a business person, what I realized is that they hate business people. They love artistic people, but this is back in 1982, 83.
Yeah.
So I don't know the organization since then.
Yeah.
But I lost. All right. Warren got the job.
After 3 months.
After 3 months. And Warren didn't have the job for very long, by the way.
What did you learn in that time working for George Lucas?
Well, I learned that there is a tremendous amount of artistic talent. I learned that you, as a business person, you have to know how to add value and how to coexist with those folks. Mm. And I learned that, the entertainment industry is not for me. Mm. I have to tell you, I think it's a lot of people, I like to mentor people. A lot of people think you always have to find the right thing. It's just as important to find what is not your sweet spot. It's really important to fail. All right. Failing is a major portion of your journey. Okay. Because most people think you need to know it like that. I'm one of these guys that has to learn and has to experience. And that's why I go from that's why I went from thing to thing to thing, because I just look at them as a learning experience. And what you take from your failures is I think more important than what you take from your successes.
I couldn't agree more. And you landed at DHL and you had 15 years at DHL. So obviously it was a good fit. And did jumping from division to division, did that teach you about entrepreneurship? And did that prepare you in a way for starting your own company?
It did. I had an accounting background. I started as internal audit director. So I did a bunch of auditing, and I found fraud in a division, and the president ended up firing everybody in the division, and he put me in charge. I remember he came down for breakfast and he said, okay, Loback, you found all these problems. I got rid of all these guys. You now own it until I get a replacement. It took him about 3 or 4 months to get a replacement. This is the very first year of my marriage to my wife, who I've been married to for 38 years. And I remember, I got to hold this thing together. And that's when I realized I don't want to be an accountant anymore. I'd like to be a general manager of some sort. I got a promotion into regional controller, and then of the Western region in Mexico. And then they offered me the job of regional operations director. And so that's when I made my jump from finance into general management.
And when did you get into sales? Did you have sales roles at any point there, or was it later?
It's really weird. I've always been a B2B guy. I love to spoil clients.
It must be hard for you right now because we're recording this in middle of July 2020. You got the pandemic's been happening for a while. So
yeah, it's hard. But I sell seals. We design and sell seals to manufacturing companies. And guess what? They're factories, and anyway, so I jumped into that, and I jumped into Darcoid, and it's been an amazing journey.
How did you end up merging 4 different companies as the way of starting your business?
Yeah, well, first of all, I wanted to start a business, but I couldn't figure out what to start. Okay, and I think that's true of a lot of people. They want to be their own boss. They want to do their own thing. They think they got to create the world. But what I was struggling with that. I had been in an internet startup. I had been in a life science research company where we tested drugs on people, HIV positive people. And so I was trying to find something that would connect with me. And I wasn't finding it. And the .com in 1990 became the .bomb. I went through that with an internet startup. And I was just lucky. And so I was talking to somebody, I was saying, I want to own a business. And I remember a guy saying, I know a guy who has a business that wants to sell his business. He doesn't have any family. He hasn't done any succession planning. And I think he'd get along with you. And I said, hey, if you know him, please introduce me, because if this was a client, if he's a client of yours, I want to meet him. And that's how I connected. And I connected with the owners of Darcoid. I worked out a buy-sell agreement. We shared an office for 8 years. Al Armstrong and I shared an office for 8 years.
So he stuck around for 8 years after you acquired the business.
Yeah.
So he just didn't want to own it anymore. He was just tired or something.
He knew it was time. He was 78 years old. He knew. He and Frank, they owned it. Frank was the finance guy. Al was the operating guy. They knew it was time out. It's interesting. Guys in their late 70s and 80s, they start getting rid of stuff. You spend all your life acquiring stuff. Mm-hmm. And then they spend their last whatever getting rid of it all. Mm. And so they knew they wanted to turn it over to somebody. I was lucky enough to be introduced to him. We connected. We shared an office. There were no secrets whatsoever. He taught me the business. I learned it on my own. And then that's
so you knew nothing about the seal business when you, okay.
I didn't even know. I had no idea what a seal was.
And you somehow, so you purchased Darcoid, but you also purchased 3 other businesses, which you rolled into Darcoid?
Yep. And then I just started verbalizing once again. I wanted to be a Parker distributor. So I started talking to people I called up one of the Parker regional managers, and I said, introduced myself, and I'd said, I'd like to be a Parker distributor. If you have a need for a new distributor, or if you have a distributor that is not doing well, I would like to meet that person because maybe they would want to sell. And he said, I'll get back to you. And that's how I found NorCal Seal, which is the oldest distributor, Parker Seal distributor, in North America. And then the same thing with the semiconductor. I told somebody I was verbalizing that I want to be in the semiconductor fab world. This was back in 2009. And some guy goes, hey, I know a fab company down in Austin that, there's a really great guy that's looking for a new partner. I said, hey, I'd like to meet him. And it's all, for me, it's always been verbalizing your dream, what you want, in networking.
How was it? So you acquire a business that's in Austin, but you're in the Bay Area.
Right.
How did you manage to oversee that business from a distance, and how is it culturally bringing the businesses together?
It's not easy. I mean, it was a total turnaround situation. It was a very small business. Now remember, I'm a small business person. I got 60 employees. I'm trying to create what's called a small giant, right? You don't have to be big. You just have to be really good. Mm-hmm. All right. And technically focused, I believe in focus. But anyway, so bringing in that culture was not difficult. What was difficult, I bought it. It was at the bottom. It was dying. I bought it and I had to turn it around. And this is where my daughter, Alex, and my wife, Becky, got involved. They were instrumental. We would fly down to Austin. We would live in Austin for a while, and we would work out things. We would put money in, but more importantly, we put in blood, sweat, and tears, because that's what it took. And you had to regain the respect of the suppliers, the people, and the customers. And that takes time.
What were a few of the things that you found that needed fixing when you took over the business?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that this is where my financial background really kicked in. I mean, the place was, had a lot of financial problems. And so you had to put in, what are the costs? What are the revenue? What are the things that drive financial success? What are, ethics? It was a very ethical organization, but they were like, once they got money, they spend it on something else. And you have to have discipline. You have to have financial discipline. So we started putting that. And then the other thing is ethics, your word. If you tell somebody you're going to do something, that's your word, your reputation. As a business owner, it's your reputation. And so you have to deliver on that, on your word. You have to make good on your word. As you start to build trust, trust is earned. As you earn the trust of big companies, organizations that are important to you. In our case, in CrestTec, it was manufacturing partners. If I can earn the respect and trust of manufacturing partners, then they will start giving us terms. We didn't have terms. We were prepaid. We'd have to pay cash before we would get them to make a part. And so then they started giving us credit in terms because our word was good.
Because it helps with cash flow. Yeah.
And then you can start turning the cash. It's a long journey. It took 3 years, but and we have great people at CrestTec. Don't get me wrong. We kept the good people, and we've now built it into a really successful small business.
That's great. Now, it says in your bio that you took Darcoid from $5 million in revenue to $30 million. So when you first acquired Darcoid, was it at $5 million?
Yeah, it was $5 million. CrestTec was about $1 million.
How did you, on the heels of the .com meltdown, on the heels of having worked for a dot bomb, how did you put together financing to acquire a $5 million business, having never run your own business before?
I financed it on my own. I've never taken money from anybody, and I'm pretty conservative. I don't like to borrow money. So,
did you work out a deal with the owner that you're going to pay him out over time? Is that what it was?
I did.
Okay.
I did it. Darcoid, I did an earn-out.
Okay.
Darcoid, I did an earn-out. It took me 8 years to pay him off. I paid him interest. I paid him a fair interest rate. I paid him every quarter. And CrestTec, I paid cash because CrestTec was 10 years after Darcoid.
Okay.
So I had actually accumulated enough cash to actually pay cash.
So you put in a lot on the line there to buy a $5 million business as your first purchase, as your first entrepreneurial venture, never having run a business before, never having been in the industry before. Were you nervous going into it?
I didn't put it all on red. I negotiated it so that I would not lose everything. Becky and I didn't want to, we've been working for 20, 25 years, owned a home, had daughters, all that stuff. We didn't want to lose it all because we didn't know anything about this business.
Right. Yeah. Right.
So,
yeah. And what did your wife say? What did Becky say when you decided to do this? Was she supportive or she? So
she said, "Okay, honey, there's a book out there called Honey, I Want to Own a Business. Anybody that wants to start a business should read it. Now, I know it's like 20 years old. It's a phenomenal business, all right, because it talks about the partnership journey. And she had a friend who lost everything because her husband had started multiple businesses and signed personal guarantees. They lost everything. And so she said to me, okay, so I read the book. I said, read this book, honey. First of all, I made her read it because I had already read it. She came back to me and says, I have only one condition. I go, what's that? She goes, no personal guarantees.
Smart lady.
And I said, okay, I can live with that.
Mm-hmm.
With that. So I looked at it from a risk management standpoint. I said, let's go on this journey, but let's not put everything on red. Let's not put everything on one number, because as a business person, I think the best practice I can advise somebody is to run your business with a healthy dose of paranoia. All right. Always anticipate always anticipate the worst that can hurt you, because the worst is what will burn you. The upside is icing on the cake. Don't think about the upside. Now, I'm not saying being a negative person. So I thought about what could burn me. And so I put safety nets in place. I made sure I didn't personally guarantee anything. I made sure it wasn't always my cash. I made sure that I was disciplined in cost control. I made sure that cash flow terms worked, things like that. All right. And you got to be frugal.
That's great. Well, I know we're running short on time. The time flew by, Bob. So thank you for taking the time to talk with us. But I want to wrap things up with the question I always ask, which is, let's pretend we're at an awards banquet, much like the Oscars or the Emmys, and you're receiving an award for lifetime achievement for everything you've done up until this point. Who do you thank, in addition to family and friends? Who are the people that you would acknowledge?
First of all, I thank my mother. I mean, I was raised by an amazing woman. All right. I had a great dad. All right. But, my mom was an amazing individual. Obviously my wife is phenomenal. I like to talk about how I married up. So I married somebody like way smarter than me, and so my wife. And then I had a teacher in high school that really impacted me. I mean, and then I've had mentors. I had a guy that I worked for at DHL for 9 years. A guy named Steve Waller, who's still a good friend of mine. He taught me so much. All right. So, I think it's important. Men need men. Men need mentors. Men need men. And and I think it's forgotten a little bit. I'm not an anti-woman person, but guys need to learn from other guys. And I've had some great mentors. Yeah. Plus an awesome wife and mother.
Great. So Darcoid and CrestTec are the two companies. Where can people go to learn more about you, Bob?
Our websites, darcoid.com, cresttech.com. I mean, we're a business to business organization. So we're not a B2C. And so we haven't spent all this money, developing these websites that are phenomenal. But, you go there and there's contact us. And,
great.
And
all right.
The best place.
Great. Thanks so much, Bob.
Thank you, John. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution. Revolution. And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.